John began to get agitated. I can't do this anymore. Every time she attacks me, I ask her to calm down so we can talk it out calmly. She only gets more upset. His tone became more heightened as he leaned towards me from the couch. I go crazy when this happens. I sit and I think about it all night, and if we don't resolve it, it just consumes me. I want to resolve it right now. Inside, I keep thinking this is our last argument. After all that we've done and all we've been through, this is it. I just want to know that we'll be okay and get reconnected. And it gets worse when she pulls away to calm down, because then I think for sure she's going to leave me. I tried everything I know, but I can't seem to reassure myself in these moments. What John is expressing in these moments is his anxious state of mind when he feels disconnected from his wife. And while this is most prominent in these heightened moments that I just described, the mindset is always prevalent in his relationships. Now, this, of course, is just an example of what I deal with a lot of couples, especially when one or both partners fall into an anxious attachment style. And it's like the default program for them, or what we call the internal working model, their default set program that their early experiences taught them of what relationships were like. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to dive into this idea and give examples of what this internal working model is for the anxiously attached. Welcome to Trauma-Free Relationship. I'm your host, Tom Phil, and as a therapist, I've spent over 10,000 hours helping couples work through their trauma so they can repair ruptures, heal their wounds, and communicate from a place of wholeness and connection. Let's get started. Okay, as I mentioned in the opening, and I gave kind of a narrative example of what I deal with every day with couples, especially with somebody who's more anxiously attached. This is their state of mind when there's ruptures and disruptions that occur in the relationship that stress the emotional bond. Then their anxious state of mind becomes even more prominent. And inside, oftentimes, there's great fear that, well, this might be it. We might be, this might be our last argument that we have. And so that heightens their anxiety even more. Deep down, they're trying to get reassurance, but if they have a partner who's more avoidantly attached, and their partner starts to shut down or pull away or can't give them the reassurance they need in those moments, then that only heightens their anxiety even more. So that's what we're going to dive into. Now, I use the word mindset, but in clinical terms, it's called internal working model. And that was a term that was coined by the creator of attachment theory, John Bowlby. And an internal working model is essentially an emotionally cognitive framework based on early childhood experiences from caretakers that shapes expectations and behaviors in our adult relationships. So for the anxiously attached individual, these expectations are as follows: that relationships are unpredictable, and potentially unreliable. They lead to a need for reassurance and a fear of abandonment. They have a negative view of themselves, meaning they doubt whether they are deserving of love and attention. And they have a mostly positive view of others, but others cannot be relied upon to consistently provide emotional availability, emotional nourishment, and responsivity. So as you can see, the relationship is more one of negative self. I may not be deserving of love because I always have to give so much in my relationships, and my partners don't always give as much as I do. And so that only reinforces my negative view of myself. And even though I think more positively of my partners, they cannot be relied upon. because my experience has taught me that people are inconsistent. Sometimes they'll give you the attention you need. Sometimes they'll give you the reassurance, but other times they won't. So you always have to stay vigilant, and you always have to stay heightened in order to be able to get the kind of reassurance you need in a relationship. So what does the behaviors of an anxiously attached partner look like? Well, first of all, it can be seeking excessive reassurance. This might be fishing for compliments, needing to be reassured in an argument, asking for validation and attention. And so where some of these things are perfectly normal to have in a relationship, we all sometimes fish for compliments. We all sometimes need reassurance. For the anxiously attached, this is taken up a notch or two. It's all that much more intense and excessive in a relationship. And if they have a partner that's more avoidantly attached, then what happens is this feels suffocating. This feels overwhelming. And it throws the more avoidant partner into a place where they feel like they can't do anything right. Because if they do give reassurance, it doesn't seem to sustain the anxiously attached person. They seem to even want more. And so this can create real cycles in a relationship for sure. So other kinds of behaviors that this looks like in a relationship, it could be very clingy or dependent type of behavior. So difficulty being alone or needing to have constant contact with your partner. Okay, text me when you get there. Okay, make sure you download this app so I can see where you are. Let's keep track of each other. Won't that be fun? Because they don't mind being kept track of, but if they have a partner that feels really suffocating, if it feels very intrusive to their partner, like it infringes upon their independence, which more avoidantly attached individuals very much value their independence. They value their autonomy. And so downloading an app and so that your partner can see where you are all the time, that really feels suffocating to a more avoidantly styled partner, but it sure doesn't to the anxiously styled partner. They think that sounds like a great idea. You can see where I am and I can see where you are, and we'll do that together. Won't that be fun? So that kind of clingy or dependent behavior. What do you mean you've got plans tonight? I didn't hear about these plans. Well, I'm just going to go out with the guys. Or, well, I'm just going to have a girls' night. Oh, okay. And all of a sudden they feel very abandoned, very rejected, that their partner might want to do something without them. So another type of behavior or way that this shows up in a relationship is the anxiously attached individual can have trust issues. They can think highly of others. Sometimes they can put their partners on pedestals and really look up to them in some ways. But there's always a little bit of mistrust too. And that's where the anxiousness, the anxious pump gets primed inside the anxiously attached partner, is because they never quite trust that their partner is going to be able to show up for them when they need. So they have to keep their partner on a very short leash, so to speak. They can struggle to trust their partner or loved ones, fearing that they may be hurt or betrayed. They might go through their phones or their social media accounts. They might have thoughts about, well, you went to lunch with some coworkers and you've talked about this one female coworker or one male coworker quite a lot. And now I'm beginning, it almost plants a little seed in my mind, and I'm beginning to wonder if something's going on. Not because I have any clear evidence or you've done anything wrong on the surface, but because that's just coming from that anxiously attached place. It's coming from that place where I just never quite know and can't fully trust. So when I talk about these behaviors, I also want you to think about the anxiously attached person on a continuum, from slightly anxiously attached to extremely anxiously attached. And part of the reason I want you to think about it on a continuum is not all attachment styles look the same in relationships. Matter of fact, someone who may be more anxiously attached can show up a little bit different in one relationship than they might another relationship. So I don't want us to think that these are discrete, hardwired behaviors that I'm describing, that we can just put them into a box. Oftentimes, the anxious attachment style is created because there's inconsistent parenting growing up. But that might mean that there is a relatively absent father, but that father, when they are home, when they're not working, is very present. So they may have a secure relationship with the father, and that's whether it's a male or female that might be anxiously attached. But since the father works so much and is gone, there's that absence there. But the mother is very inconsistent in parenting style. The child may never really be able to predict whether the mother is going to show up. She may be very abandoning, very rejecting in her parenting style. So you could have sort of a secure style in one parent and an insecure style with another. So you've got sort of a mix that can show up differently in relationships. And that might look different if both your parents are living in a home versus, say, separated, and you're shuffling between homes, say in the case of a divorce. And it could look different if they're both in the same home and they're both rejecting. They're both unable to be consistent. So then you've got both parents that are physically present but are emotionally unavailable and unresponsive when you need them, or only at certain times when would they be responsive. So again, I want you to think about this on a continuum, because these aren't discrete behaviors that show up consistently across relationships. By and large, there is a thread that runs through them, and that thread can be excessive reassurance, clingy or dependent behavior, or sometimes not trusting others. But whether it shows up by them looking through your social media accounts in your phones and getting paranoid that you're having an affair or cheating on them, versus just needing and fishing for some compliments and needing to be reassured in an argument, might be the lesser of the behaviors. So I want to throw that out there and say, as you're walking through this and thinking about your own relationship, don't hear what I'm saying and try to put it into a rigid box, because it doesn't always work that way. We have to hold our theories loosely in order to look for the exceptions sometimes where things don't always fit neatly into our theories. Okay, so what is the mindset of the anxiously attached, and more importantly, the impact on relationships? What is the impact for an anxiously attached person on the relationships? That mindset that they have of, this could be it. My partner could leave me. They could think that it's not worth it. They're not going to be able to show up for me. Well, first of all, they could put pressure on their partner to provide more and more reassurance, to provide more and more sense of safety in the relationship. So I don't want you to be available to me sometimes. I need you to be everything for me. You need to be my lover, best friend, confidant, spouse. You need to be emotionally available and responsive to me almost 100% of the time. There's very little room for error here. And that can be exhausting for a partner in a relationship, because, again, it's going to throw that partner into a place where he or she's going to feel like nothing I do is enough. Even if I did show up 100% of the time, it's not enough to sustain my partner. We go right back. The next day we wake up, we go right back to zero. And now I've got to fill up this bucket with reassurance all over again, and there's no sustaining impact to this. So the partner can oftentimes begin to feel like it's just not enough. I can't do enough and be enough for my partner. This can also create jealousy and possessiveness in a relationship, wanting to know the whereabouts of the partner, as I said before, tracking their phone, wanting to know who they're talking to or texting them a lot. And so jealousy and possessiveness can creep into a relationship as well. And then, of course, it can create conflict and arguments, because when their partner's trying to reassure them but feel like their efforts are not working, then they can get frustrated, they can shut down, they can start to withdraw, or if they're anxious, they can start turning up the heat on their partner as well, or they can feel like themselves that they're going to be left and abandoned because they're not measuring up to their partner's expectations. So I usually use the example of a more avoidant partner with a more anxious partner because that's the most common combination that we see. But certainly there could be an anxious partner and an anxious partner, two together that way as well, which creates its own kind of conflict and arguments. And if you have two partners that are constantly trying to get reassurance for each other, then it can create real conflict because neither one is ever getting enough to sustain themselves in the relationship, to feel like there is a sense of safety and security in that relationship. So you can take that default program, that anxiously, I'm going to be abandoned and rejected program, and you can sort of double it because now both partners are feeling that way. So if you find yourself in a relationship where you think you're anxiously attached and you might have an anxiously attached partner, it feels like we have these big clashes, and sometimes neither one of us can get the reassurance we need. So there's all these fireworks and conflict at times, and then we sort of calm down and we're good for a little while, but then we start that pattern all over again. That's certainly something I've seen a lot in my couples as well. What makes changing the anxiously attached mindset difficult? What makes this difficult to change? Well, first of all, let me say it is not a prison sentence. If you have a more anxiously attached mindset or internal working model, this is not a prison that you are locked in for the rest of your life. Plenty of research has been shown that we have something called neuroplasticity, meaning through new experiences, we can create new networks in our brain that help us change our attachment style. So that's the great news. The difficult news to hear is that you got to do the work because it doesn't just happen by repeating the same pattern in your relationships. And part of what makes it difficult to change is that research shows that certain brain areas, such as the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, the hippocampus, all these areas in our brain play crucial roles in forming and maintaining these type of anxious or avoidant models. So, for example, the prefrontal cortex is highly involved in higher level cognitive functions, including social cognition and emotion regulation. And the amygdala is where our emotional center is. It's our emotional processing center. It's where we process fear and anxiety, which are central to attachment dynamics. So if we get triggered, then we're operating more out of our amygdala area, and our prefrontal cortex area is not firing as much, meaning that we don't have access to those higher level cognitive social functions and emotion regulation tools that we need at times. And then the other part is the hippocampus. It's vital for memory formation, including the encoding of relational experiences. Now, what's important to know about that is that it is largely embedded in implicit memory. So internal working models are embedded in implicit memory, which means it's not necessarily accessed by our verbal left hemisphere, which is the verbal part of our brain. So we have processing in our brain that goes on all the time that we are not necessarily putting into words. So when you get anxious by your partner in your relationship, you're not saying to yourself necessarily, oh, I'm getting very anxious right now. I bet I'm being triggered by my anxiously attached style. And I know where this comes from with my inconsistent parenting. And what I need to do is just self-soothe right now. You're not putting those things into words. All you're feeling is this feeling throughout your body that's telling you that you need to do what you've always done, which is to push and turn up the heat and try to get your partner to comply because you need reassurance and you need it now. So Part of what makes this tricky is that in changing our internal working styles and models is that we are trying to change something that's not explicit and it's not verbal in us. It's one thing for us to verbally be able to put this stuff into words. It's another thing that when we get triggered, we become consumed by the anxiety that we then have difficulty being able to create any kind of distance from it, so that we end up being able to have more control over that anxiety. So that's some of the reasons why it can be tricky at times in order to be able to change some of these patterns. But I want to give you some options to do this, because there are some things that you can do that are very much in your control. The first thing you can do is start practicing mindfulness and self-soothing. You, the anxious attached person, one of the gifts they have been given is they are often very in touch with their feelings. They often have a good understanding of and connection with their body, and they know when they're starting to feel anxious. And they often are pretty good about being able to verbalize what it is they're feeling in their body. This is a superpower for the anxiously attached. This is a very good thing, because what you can do is you can learn to create more of a working distance when you do feel anxious. So one of the visuals I want to give you is, imagine you're in an elevator and you're starting to feel anxious, and that elevator is starting to rise. And with you in the elevator, that means that you are feeling that anxiety rise within you as well. Now I want you to picture standing outside that elevator, and you're watching the elevator go up, but you're not in the elevator. You've got some working distance from the anxiety that you're feeling. And this is sort of the end result of what I want you to try to accomplish. By using mindfulness, by doing some deep breathing, some meditation, some grounding exercises, you're giving yourself a space and a place to be where you're not so consumed by the anxious, but you can create a working distance from it so that you can talk back to it, that you can reason and rationalize with it, and you can bring that prefrontal cortex more online so that you can use more of your emotion regulation tools that you need in those moments. So this is why I talk so often about meditation or grounding exercises or using mindfulness, because it's really helpful for the anxiously attached to be able to create some self-soothing in their own life and in their own body in those moments. Learning to validate your emotions, acknowledge your feelings without judgment, and practice some self-compassion. This might look at you being able to talk to that inner child that holds all that anxiety. And you might say something like, "It's okay, sweetheart. I know why you're anxious, because you could never predict when somebody would show up for you consistently growing up. And I know that made you very fearful. And I know you only wanted reassurance because deep down, all you really want is to be loved. But I'm here for you now. And you're a part of me, and I can help comfort you and soothe you, because we're not a little child anymore. We're an adult now, and we're a very accomplished adult. And so just stay here with me. It's okay. I'm right here with you, and we're going to get through this together." Now, I know that sounds a little bit strange, but you can talk to that inner child that holds all that anxiety, and you can learn to comfort and soothe it when you need to. Lastly, let me say, as much as possible, you want to be able to try to find others that have a more secure attachment style. Because research shows that when we associate with others that are more securely attached, that over the long haul, that tends to rub off on us. That tends to have an impact, and it tends to model different ways of responding when we see our friends or our partner respond to things differently than we would respond. It shows us, oh, I could develop that tool. I like how they were able to remain more calm, or I like how they were able to take in that compliment and not question or doubt it. So surrounding yourself with people that are able to really model a secure attachment style to you is going to be really important as well. Okay, I could go on and on here, but probably that's enough to give you a good start. I wanted to talk about how the more anxious attachment style, the mindset or the internal working model that often comes along with this particular style of attachment. And so I've also given you today, I think, a couple of things that you can start working on yourself. And so in conclusion, I just want to say thank you so much for listening. I always really appreciate the feedback you're giving me. And until we talk to you again, take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Trauma-Free Relationship, a podcast for the healing of attachment trauma. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or our website at traumafreerelationship.com. Be sure to look for our next episode on your favorite streaming service.